Well, I'm sure most of you saw the news the other day. Joe Biden said, if you're having trouble figuring out whether to vote for him or Trump, then you ain't black. And then the internet erupted, basically triggering everybody except for Biden sycophants. Donald Trump started selling t-shirts. Man, what a cycle. But you know what? From this, I think there's a lot to talk about. We can definitely talk about Joe Biden, but I'm sitting here looking at these stories. Joe Biden now apologizes. Charlemagne the God from the Breakfast Club show has criticized Joe Biden's history, or did he defend him? And therein lies the big problem. We've got the story saying that Charlemagne the God defends Biden's support for black community, but then we have this one saying Charlemagne the God slams Joe Biden. And I thought to myself, this is a weird crack in the foundation you rarely ever see, where there's a split between whether or not people should be angry at Joe Biden or not. I think it has to do with the fracturing of the left for the most part. But the question I have is, let me ask you guys something. Why was everything so predictable? Completely predictable. I mean, this is a little funny seeing the media kind of flub this. It really does look like Charlemagne the God didn't actually defend Joe Biden. And now apparently, P. Diddy is stepping in saying, I already told you the black phone ain't free. So why would the media say something like this? It's the very rare, desperate attempt at defending Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden's got his stance, and they're coming out saying it's no big deal. It's no big deal. And it's so predictable. It's so obvious. We knew who was going to criticize him. Of course, if Joe Biden does it, you're going to see criticism come out from conservatives and Trump supporters. Of course, you're going to see establishment Democrats defend him. And of course, you're going to see progressive leftists criticize him. It almost has nothing to do with anything. It's almost like everyone's playing a disingenuous game to try and convince people who aren't even watching that they're right. And, this is why you can't support Joe Biden. And I just don't care. I can't seem to figure out how do you get through this, right? One of the biggest things that makes me angry with everything, and you'll probably understand this if you watch a lot of my videos, is it's the deception. It's the lies. It's the plastic veil that exists over our reality, where every corporate statement, of course it's a lie. Every politician's statement, of course it's a lie. And obviously I'm not saying literally every, I'm just, exaggerating. It's like 90%, 99%. People are just going on Twitter and they're saying what they think they need to say to justify why it is they're part of whatever tribe they are. And then you've got the people who support Biden. They don't actually care about this man. They just have an emotional reaction about how much they hate Trump. So I find myself sitting here questioning how many people just hate the Democrats. I mean, I certainly am biased against them, right? But I don't say the things I say simply because I'm like, ooh, this is my opportunity to prove, right? But that's what people will claim. When I look at a lot of the conservatives who are criticizing Joe Biden, I really did feel like, do you really care about this? Like, you're tweeting, you're mad Joe Biden said this. Most of these people I saw on Twitter, not even black. Okay. I think there is a real reason to be upset about it for sure. And I've got a tweet here from Zubi. If you're familiar with Zubi, he's a cool dude. And I'll read through it and it explains why it was wrong for Joe Biden to say that. And that's why Joe Biden is getting slammed. So of course, I'm not saying that all of these conservatives shouldn't have called it out. I'm just saying it was so predictable, right? So you can see if someone would say something, whether or not one tribe would react or another tribe wouldn't. But I will say, the worst part about it right now is that Joe Biden was clearly in the wrong, right? Even Charlemagne the God is coming out, slamming his record. Joe Biden's apologized for it, so fine, we can all move on. But you can see the sycophants, the people who work for Biden, obviously, they have to defend him. And many establishment types saying ridiculous things like, even if Joe Biden boiled babies and ate them, they'd still vote for the guy. It's just, you know exactly what's going to happen. A natural, an oil spill happens. Then the company comes out and they're going to give you their canned press statement. They're not going to tell you what really happened. We have no idea what really happened. So we live in this world where we all secretly know deep down who's lying, why they're lying. You know when they lie. You know what doesn't make sense. But there is this sheet of plastic in between us and them when they speak, and it muffles what's really being said. So you don't quite hear exactly what the truth is. I can't stand it. So interestingly, Charlemagne the God and many other people are actually coming out and criticizing Joe Biden. And I have to wonder, I don't even know whose opinion to trust for the most part. There's a few people I trust, right? So I tweeted about this and some people asked, does it apply to me? And I'm like, probably a little bit, because I'm not going to pretend to be perfect. But for the most part, no. I have no problem saying what I need to say, criticizing who I need to criticize. The Ahmaud Arbery case certainly got a bunch of people mad at me, many conservatives. And I got accused by one conservative outlet of pushing misinformation. And I'm like, dude, just stop. Okay, these people, they want to take stances that it's a virtue signal for the most part, to varying degrees. I don't care. I'm just so sick of it. I cannot stand watching the politicians just get up there and just say this stupid trash. Do I think Joe Biden actually cares? Look at this. Joe Biden apologized. Let's actually read this. No, I don't think Joe Biden cares. I think he went back, and the reason it took him so long to actually apologize is the first thing he did was he went to his consultant and said, how many people actually care about this? And they're like, well, it is a lot of conservatives calling you out, and it is the progressives, not really your base. Your base will defend you no matter what. How many people do we have to win over? And you see how the game is played. All right, but let's read this, and we'll keep that framing in mind as we go through what people are now saying. Because I do think some of the opinions, obviously like P. Diddy coming out and saying something, I'm sure he really means it, because he's not in the political game. I should not have been so cavalier. Joe Biden apologizes for suggesting black Trump voters ain't black. Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden apologized. We get it. Saying I'm not so cavalier. Yeah. During his exchange, we know this. I mean, yeah. Whatever, man. I'm not going to read Joe Biden's apology. Let's see what Charlemagne the God had to say about this. Radio host Charlemagne the God issued a scathing rebuke to former Vice President Joe Biden following the presidential candidate's gaffe about black voters. Charlemagne condemned Biden's track record with black voters, stating that the former vice president was a very intricate part of the systemic racism that needs to be dismantled. My overall takeaway from the conversation is that I heard him talk about things he did for black people back in the day. But what have you done for me lately is my motto, the radio host explained to CNN on Friday. I see black communities catching hell no matter who is in the White House. I definitely agree with that. Charlemagne was angered that people talked about how the coronavirus was devastating the black community, but failed to talk about how health issues stemming from systemic racism that has never been fixed. The radio host then turned his critique directly to Biden. Like I said before, if you have created legislation that is hurt, then you have to create legislation that helps. It's just that simple, Charlemagne continued. The whole system needs to be dismantled and rebuilt, and he has been a very intricate part of that system. Whether you're talking about 84 with the mandatory minimum sentence for drug dealers, when you talk about 86 with crack laws that gave you more time for crack cocaine and powder cocaine, if you talk about the 94 crime bill. Interesting. He really was one of the people on the front lines when it came to the war on drugs and mass incarceration. If he wants to be president, he needs to fix that. So I'll say right here, look, I think those were really bad things. 100% really, really bad things. Especially in Illinois, they have mandatory minimums. These are not, it's not the way I think things should be run. But what's interesting to me is, and I mean no disrespect, but Charlemagne clearly views this through a racial lens. I can respect that he sees the damage as it affects his community, and then he speaks out, wanting that to be fixed. I can respect that. But I think for the most part, this is still an inherent part of the problem of politics in going back to what I explained with everybody lying and virtue signaling. There are a lot of people that realize you've got your market share, you've got your base, that's who you need to speak for. Charlemagne the God speaks for, him. I don't think when he's making these statements, it's deceptive or anything like that. That's not what I mean to say. I think it's that he looks at his community and the damage and he wants it fixed, and I can respect that. What I try to do is, I'll look at what he has to say, I agree with it, and then I think about how these laws have affected everybody, and can we do right by everybody? So again, no disrespect. I actually, agree with what he's saying. I'm just saying maybe we need to have a broader view of things. But when you take that, I think there's some honor in what Charlemagne is pointing to, saying, I'm here for, for my people, and this needs to be fixed, and Biden isn't doing that. It's the gist of the conversation. I think you take that to a dark place where it goes further, and then you find people won't call out when their side does something wrong. So it's like positive and negatives to every story. But here's what I want to do. I want to show you, first I showed you Diddy's response to Joe Biden. I want to show you this story from the Washington Post. White liberals dumb themselves down when they speak to black people, a new study contends. I've covered this story several times. I believe it was it Yale? I'm not entirely sure. Is that what they say? They do a narrative, ridiculous nonsense. A new study suggests that the words you use may depend on whether the club secretary's name is Emily, a stereotypical white name, or Lakeisha, a stereotypically black name. If you're a white liberal writing to Emily, you might use words like melancholy or euphoric to describe the mood of the book. Whereas you might trade these terms for simpler sad or happy if you're corresponding with Lakeisha. But if you're a white conservative, your diction won't depend on the presumed race of your interlocutor. This is a story I've covered quite a bit. And I think this shows exactly why there's whatever the shift has been in politics, why I'm where I am. Isn't it profoundly more honest to just talk to people, not try and change who you are because you make assumptions about the other person? It's true. In whatever, I don't know if this is true back then, but it's true now. We see this study. White liberals view minorities as stupider. They change the way they speak to sound stupider. There's a couple things there as it pertains to the dishonesty that I've been speaking about. The reason why people change the way they speak is they're trying to convince you that you are like them. And they want to make sure you don't view them as separate from you. It's an old sales technique. It's like one of the basic sales techniques. So when I used to do nonprofit fundraising, they tell you straight up, adopt the mannerisms of the person you're pitching. That's true for sales. It's true for fundraising or whatever. So the way I explain it to people, if I'm standing outside and I'm wearing clothes like this, it's fairly neutral. Jeans, open button up, rolled up sleeves. If I see a guy in a suit and I walk up to him and go, "What up, bro? Come here, man. We're saving the environment, whatever." He's going to be like, "I have no time for this." But if I approach him and go, "Excuse me, sir, a minute of your time," reach out my hand to shake it and say, "We've got a serious problem." You adopt the mannerisms that you assume about the other person. It is a manipulation technique. It's one of the reasons why I hated nonprofit fundraising. It was the opposite of what I entered this industry thinking we were going to do good and help people. And eventually it just turns into, can you trick people into handing over their cash for a cause you claim you're fighting for? And then half the time they're not even doing that. So here's what we end up seeing right now. The reason why you'll find, me, where I am politically, is not because I think I have to pander to someone. It's actually quite the opposite. Maybe this is my personal bias, but I think it's reflective of the greater atmosphere in politics right now. Conservatives don't change who they are in an attempt to speak, to minorities. They don't talk down. They don't make assumptions. They just talk. I guess what that says to me is they're not trying to adopt any mannerisms to convince you of anything. But if a liberal consciously changes their behavior to speak to you, well, that shows you they don't know about you, they don't care about you, and they're not approaching you honestly with real ideas. They're coming at you from, honestly, an emotional point of view to trigger something subconscious within you. I actually think that's what Joe Biden was trying to do when he said, "You ain't black." He thought it was funny. He thought it would resonate with this community. We see this also with Ocasio-Cortez putting on the fake accent, with Hillary Clinton putting on a fake accent, something apparently you're likely to see conservatives do less, at least as of today. I don't know if that was true back in the day, but probably considering conservatives were often, hated by the media and dragged by the media. But now, there's some things like the Ahmaud Arbery case. In my opinion, every conservative who came out and took this hard virtue signal stance is no better than any one of these liberals doing the exact same thing, pandering without evidence. I don't care. I'm not playing that game. So I think it's fair to point this out 100%, even though it probably does just exacerbate the problems of bias. You will find there are a lot of conservatives who are grifters, right? That's the word they use. They're just saying what they got to say to get the attention, to get the money, to get the big house, to whatever. But it's a tendency. What I find is the tendency on the left is sophistry. And the tendency for now on the culture war right is free inquiry, debate, and honesty. Again, tendency. I don't know to which degree, but there are many progressive personalities that I have tremendous respect for because I think they're being honest. I disagree with their opinions. That's cool. I disagree with conservative opinions too on a lot of things. But there are many, many more left-wing personalities who engage in simple sophistry. I mean, you look at someone like Jennifer Rubin, the conservative blogger for the Washington Post. I think it's funny that there have been attempts from people to compare me to her. Her opinions are entirely predictable. And if you took each and every one of her tweets and laid them out and actually graphed them, numbered them and sorted them by topic, you'd be like, this woman clearly has no real principles or moral structure. Her opinion flips back and forth, left and right, just depending on whatever's happening in the media. It is entirely predictable. The opposite of, say, someone like, Matt Gaetz, off the top of my head, because he actually pushed back against, I think it was the Iran War Powers Resolution. He got attacked for it. There are many Republicans without principles, but I believe, again, it's a tendency. Now, to go back to the Joe Biden thing, and I really want to highlight this tweet from Zubi, because he breaks down why it is fair to be upset about this. The first thing I'll say is to a lot of the conservatives that were talking about how outraged they were, I kind of roll my eyes like, listen, I don't think any of you have a right to be offended on behalf of anybody else. You know what I mean? They're like, I can't believe Joe Biden would say this. Like, yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be upset. From my point of view, I can't speak for the black community. I can tell you how I would feel if someone used my race against me because I've seen it, back and forth. So that's my feeling. And I'm not saying white people shouldn't have an opinion on that. No, of course they should. I'm just like, I kind of roll my eyes. I get it. Joe Biden said something. Here comes, the outrage machine. It happens on both sides. But as it turns out, I think it's fair to say there's a real reason to be upset. And I defer to Zubi. I'm not going to read through every single tweet, but I want to point out something the left does that relates to the dishonesty, and it relates to white people dumbing things down. And Zubi kind of nails it. I see this, and I actually understand what he's saying because there's other communities that are affected by this. But what he basically says is that, well, let me read a little bit. He says, every black person is aware of the power and pain of being considered an outsider within one's own race. This happens everywhere, but it is a common phenomenon, particularly amongst black Americans due to history and culture. He mentions a bunch of phrases I can't say on YouTube, but they're words used, like I'll give you one example, race traitor. I've seen this all the time. I've actually seen Antifa, white people, yell that at conservative black people. They target you based on your race. It's very, very racist. And basically what you see now is Joe Biden trying to use an emotional attack on community to base when he said, if you're not vote, if you haven't figured out, then you ain't black, targeting the one thing that they feel kind of unites them as a community. What Zubi says is that I'm hoping I'm getting the gist of this right. Let me read this. Zubi says this form of ostracization is particularly painful for black Americans who are largely disconnected from their African roots due to the horrors of slavery. As a substitute, many cling to a fuzzy concept of blackness for the sake of identity and community. So to be considered not black is like being an outcast of a community that is often already feels alienated. He goes on to mention that he's not American. He says, I do not speak on behalf of anybody but myself, but these are my own thoughts. I don't know if people feel that way. I really, really don't. It's Zubi. I think Zubi is British. He's of Nigerian descent. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in America from the black community who don't agree, and many who do. But I see this, and it resonates with me. One point that I've often brought up, like when it comes to Occupy Wall Street, is that as somebody who comes from a mixed family, I have the unfortunate privilege of always being wrong. So I'll put it this way. If I go to, here's the privilege of being wrong. If these lefty people, these social justice people come out and make a bunch of bold statements as, they're upper class, white, college educated, young people, and they're wrong when they say things about race and class, if I challenge them, they attack me and they call me white and they insult me. So to them, I'm wrong. If I agree with them blindly because I don't want to be wrong, then they'll say, then I'm a minority, right? So they use that against me. And that's what I kind of understand. But the point I'm trying to bring up is no matter what you do, you will be in a negative position with these people. Either you're just going to lie to yourself and push falsehoods and then they'll pat you on the back, like putting you in your place, or you challenge them and say you're wrong, but then they accuse you of being all of these awful things. So for me, they'll tell, if I disagree with them, they say, you're white. If I agree with them, they'll say, yes, you understand, you're mixed and you're, from a poor community and all that stuff. You can't win. What Zubi is saying, I kind of feel like I can understand because they'll tell you you're not black when quite literally you clearly are. And at the same time, there are high profile personalities writing for major publications. We've seen some photos circulating, and there have been people like Rachel Dolezal who are clearly not black, claiming to be. And there are some high profile people who are questionable. I'm not going to name the guy, but you know what I'm talking about. Clearly a white dude, but for some reason gets propped up by the media. That's the absurdity of the deceit and the deception. So that's what I mean. That's what I've been thinking about. I don't know, man. I was originally just going to talk about Charlemagne and all that stuff, but I was looking at everything that happened, and I feel like, you can really see what's going on. So let me wrap this up and try and condense this into a simple point. There are many conservatives who are predictable. There are many conservatives who I feel are lying. But I think for the most part, the predictability from many of these conservatives comes from you understanding their principles. Democrats are predictable in another way. They tend to react on emotion. They have many more grifters, in my opinion, because of this. And they have a tendency to target people at their core in an emotional way, like what we saw with Joe Biden. And, for now it's backfiring because the progressive left is fractured from the left and their reaction is predictable. To see these people come out and go after Biden, it's hard to know what people really think and what's really, truly honest. All I can really say is, from what I've seen in media for the most part, there is a tendency on the right to be more honest, a tendency on the left to be less honest. And the best example of, in my opinion, the right being dishonest is the Ahmaud Arbery case. And I don't mean everybody, because the people who follow me, who have identified as libertarian or conservative, have mostly agreed. I mean, it's mostly thumbs up. And my point on that case is that we need to wait for the evidence because the narrative that was pushed out was obviously not correct. But to see all these conservatives jump on board and go for it, well, I'll be honest, that wasn't predictable, but it was dishonest. And maybe that's why it wasn't predictable. I don't know. Maybe what I'm saying hasn't been cohesive enough, but hopefully you get the idea. I just feel like everything we see is just layered in dishonesty. And you're more likely to get an honest approach from the culture war right, whatever that might mean. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. youtube.com/Timcast. You can go to timcast.net and it will link you there and you'll see it. It is a different channel. So go to timcast.net, check it out, and I will see you then.